Yo, what it is, YouTube? It's your boy Nitsa coming back with another bullseye of a tutorial here today on the channel. I wanted to look into which is the best UAD compressor for tracking for you. So this is kind of like a follow-up video to the very first video I did, which is the best UAD preamp for you. So I wanted to follow up with the actual compression. I wanted to talk about the mindset of what it's like to pick a compressor that is working for you, that complements your voice. Okay, so let's go over this right now today. If you guys do have any more questions or comments down below for any different type of video ideas that I want to see, go ahead and drop it. So the very first tracking compressor that we have, let's talk about it. We have something like the Fairchild, which has Varimu components. Pretty much essentially it's a Varimu compressor, which means it uses the actual tubes to do the compression. So I have a picture of a Fairchild on the inside right here. You see those big old tubes, they're doing the compression. It also has a lot of weight and tone that comes from the transformers inside of it, but this thing is just loaded with a lot of size, weight, but the tubes also add up brightness. So in the beginning, the Fairchild compressor was used in broadcast, and they wanted to make the radio signal dense so it can travel along farther distances. It's kind of like when you order a package on Amazon, the tighter that they can package the box up and into a more compact and weight, the easier it will travel, the easier it will be able to do the farther and farther trip, because it's tight, it's condensed, it's packed up, so that's one thing to think about. And with the Fairchild, let's bring it in on my voice and let's kind of hear like what are some of the qualities that if you use the compressor like this it will bring. Let's look at that real quick. Yeah, so something with like the Fairchild, you obviously hear right out the gate, it gives like a smooth analog tone. And with the Fairchild, the input gain is pretty important. It's kind of how hard you're driving, kind of like the saturation, honestly. It's a conjunction of the input gain and the threshold as well. They kind of work together in tandem to give you like a saturation. Sometimes people might turn the threshold all the way on 0 and just pump the input gain for some nice gritty distortion. But you just hear like a really, really warm, classical, familiar type of sound. If you're going for like a throwback rap sound, maybe sometimes you might want to use a Fairchild. A Fairchild 660 was something that people like to track with a lot. It's a mono version of a 670, and I like it a lot. And it's kind of like a smiley face EQ curve without the actual EQ being done, just due to the fact that you have something like the transformers, which is doing the bump for the body, and then you also have the tubes, which are adding brightness to the top. So it's like a smiley face EQ, but in a saturation type of way. And then you always got to think about the time constants with the Fairchild. That's the thing about the first type of compressors. They had fixed attack and release and everything like that. So with the Fairchild, they have the time constants. This is kind of like the fast attack, fast release, fast attack, slow release, then slow release, fast attack, slow attack, slow release. Then you have the multi-stages right here, and it's very interesting how the multi-stage works, because it kind of like on that first peak it works hard, then subsequently all of the other like signals and everything like that has like a multi-stage way of kind of letting go. And you see it's like completely reacting differently to my voice right now, versus where when I had it on 1, it was kind of like a little bit more, you can kind of tell that it's moving a little bit more quicker. So that's very interesting to see the Fairchild and how it can bring us like a throwback vintage lo-fi rap tone, if that's something that you're going for. So that's when you're picking a compressor, you always got to know like what you're going for, and then you make your decision. Okay, so after that, let's look at something like the LA2A real quick. And the most important thing about the LA2A is we got to understand the responsiveness of the LA2A. So the LA2A is using, the tubes to drive the optical component. So it uses light. So, you can kind of see a couple tubes right here. And, the main thing about the LA2A is that it uses light. So the LA2A came after the Fairchild, and the LA2A is pretty good. It's a little bit more responsive than a Fairchild. But the main thing about the LA2A is that you kind of can't go wrong with it. It has a slow attack and a slow release, but it's program dependent, so it doesn't, versus like the Fairchild kind of has the fixed type of stuff in there, but this one is more of a program dependent type of situation. So the Fairchild has fixed attack and release, but this has program dependent, attack and release. And for the most part, this one is pretty good. How I feel about this one is that pretty much if you're sending like complex material into like a complex flows, you see kind of how the needle is moving. Sometimes the LA2A can kind of sound a little bit clunky because of the way that it reacts, because it has that slow release time. Maybe it can't keep up with the flow of the rapper. So that's something that's always very important to know about too, the sound that you're going for, and also the flow of the rapper, like your flow. Are you a fast rapper? Are you a slow rapper? You know, all of that stuff will kind of play into what type of tracking compressor will work the best for you. The main type of trick too with the LA2A, if you're looking for a faster attack and releases, you're gonna have to figure out a way to get this peak reduction down a little bit lower. Usually maybe you might want to use a plugin like a Fairchild or whatever thing that can give you more volume, you know, but you got to make sure that you watch out for distortion, because you want the volume but you don't want to get like an output gain that's going to start distorting like from high levels. Main thing though, I'm trying to say, if you can figure out a way to get this knob down here, you will get a faster, you know, reaction time. So I love using the LA2A, and the other LA2As in the UAD collection, like the LA2 and the silver, they kind of have their own tonal quality to it, which I kind of don't like when I'm recording. I like just something clean that's going to manage the vocal. So if you can do something like 1 dB on the way in, it's going to be better for you, just due to the fact that now you're controlling the signal. So once it's hitting your whole vocal chain, it's hitting everything a little bit more even, versus where if you have like, you know, no compression on the way in, or if you don't have this UAD stuff, what you can just pretty much do is take an optical compressor and just put it as the first plugin, so that you're getting some of that control before you hit the rest of your vocal chain. You know what I mean? So, you know, it's just it's like just getting a way more manageable signal to come inside of something. You know, it's kind of like when you're trying to put clothes inside of a closet, and when you're using compression, it's kind of like when you folded up the clothes. Now it's compact. Now it's easier for you to put inside the closet, where if you don't fold it up and it's all scraggly and all messed up, then it's going to be a little bit harder for you to fit it inside of the closet. You know what I mean? It's just going to be a little bit messy. So that's what the LA2A does. It tidies up the sound on the way in. So after that, let's look at something like the Distressor. So so with something like the Distressor, I like the Distressor a lot, just because it's a little bit more responsive. So the Distressor is a VCA type of compressor, and the Distressor is pretty interesting because, you know, you can use it for a bunch of different things. You can use it as a saturator if you hit 1-to-1, and then it can turn into a compressor like an 1176, a DBX 160, or you know, something like a LA2A or whatever you want it to be. But the main thing when I use something like a Distressor on tracking vocals, I usually use opto. Then, you know, I go to 0 attack. I usually go to the slowest attack, and then I drive the input just up just a little bit to the point where I'm getting some of that, you know, compression, kind of like this 1 to 2 dB, you know, only at the highest peeps. That's the thing with a tracking compressor. You usually only just want to kiss that tracking compressor. But the main thing about the Distressor, why it's kind of better than the LA2A, is because it lets you dial in the controls. So maybe let's say you do want a little bit of, you know, kind of like a faster release or something like that. Well, I mean, you can go with something like this, but it depends on what you want to use. If you want a faster or a slower release, like right here, you know, the release time really starts to clamp down on it. But right here, you know, it's just really more like a peak type of, you know, controller stuff. But if you want to really have something that, you know, kind of messes up the flow of a rapper, then something like a very slow release like this, where, you know, it's still holding on to the signal while the person is rapping, that will mess you up. And that's what I want to have you guys understand too with compression, you know, like, the release time is very important. That's what I'm trying to help you understand. You know, some compressors let you dial in the attack and release, and that's why the CL1B is such a great compressor, because it literally lets people go in there and dial the attack and release time. So that's something like a Fairchild or LA2A never really offered, and that's why, you know, those compressors are just known to be very, very good. So a slow attack is always going to be good for a tracking compressor, just due to the fact that it's letting a lot of the transient, a lot of the punch come through. And you know, when a rapper's like, that's most of the transient energy is the impact of their vocals. So you want to usually do whatever you can to keep it. When I'm tracking with a distress or something like that, I never usually use any of the distortion, because I like to keep it clean on the way in. Of course, it's up to you how you want to do it. You even have the ability to you know, use something like a high pass filter, which, you know, with something like the high pass filter, you know, it's not going to be triggered for so much of the lows. It's still going to apply compression to the whole thing, but it's just that the fact that the lows are not going to be responsible for, you know, where the compression is kind of being triggered, because the low end energy, there's a lot of like sustaining energy there that can make the compressor work harder than what it has to do. So if you do something like this, the compressor will kind of be a little bit cleaner in a situation like that, you know what I mean? So yeah, this is just really leveling off everything, getting everything to be very even. And as you pay attention to, you see that some words have more power and more energy than other words, like the transients, the puh, cuh, shoulda, put've, like all of that stuff has more power. So you got to understand that too when you're setting your compressor. compressor, that you don't ever want it to be triggering those big words too much, you know, because sometimes when people are rapping, there's back-to-back consonants that can make a compressor start doing 5, 6, 7 dB, and you will start to hear the sound of the compression. I feel like for the most part, you never really want to hear the sound of the compression. You just want to tap it like 1 to 2 dB, maybe even 3 at the most. All right, cool. So then after that, you have something like you know, 1176. Usually I never like to use an 1176 on the way in. Usually this would be like the you know, you hear like there's this very aggressive type of nature to 1176. So, you know, usually I would say to never track with an 1176 like that, unless you're in a situation where you're like singing, or you have like a singer type of person, because then from there, what you have is longer sustaining. You know, you have ooh. So now the compressor is rocking a little bit more. It's a little bit more steady. But if you have somebody who's coming there rapping real quick, and I'm singing da 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 da, and I came up da da da, like all of that movement from the needle, that quick release time, you will start to hear, you know, kind of the artifacts, you know. And you got to understand something too, you know. Let me go over here and I want to show you guys something very important, why I don't like an 1176 for tracking. Now, just because I don't like it, that doesn't mean it might not work for you. All right, so the main thing about the 1176 that I want to show you guys is that with the waveform, you got to understand, like, let's say this is your audio signal. Usually the waves that have the most amount of energy, you know, that would even trigger that threshold is like the peak energy, you know. So let's say this is PK, this is the peak energy. So the main thing about the peak energy is that that's usually high mid energy, you know. That's usually like the high mid frequencies that have the most energy, you know. The low end energy, it's got energy too, but it's more of a sustaining energy that builds up, you know, kind of like a slow wave at the beach. But usually the high mid energy, which is the peak energy, that's kind of like the big splashes. So that's usually like 4K, you know, 5K, you know, all the way up there, like the main character of your vocal, like everything up in the kind of the thousands regions, 1K, 2K, 3K, 4K, the high mid energy. That's usually what would even work on the compressor. You see how when I said work, put them, sheesh, wow. You see, like usually those words have more energy than others, you know, so you got to understand that too, you know, lower words, lush, low, like words like that don't have that much consonants. They don't have that much, you know, energy as other words. So that's the thing about using 1176. It kind of, you know, when you're compressing that high mid energy, effectively what you're doing is you're kind of squeezing that harshness. And that's why I don't like to use an 1176 on the way in, because when it's too fast and it's, you know, working a little bit too hard, that sibilance will start to be, you know, condensed, compact, and you'll hear it when you record with it. Like it will become too sloppy. So that's the main thing. But if you do want to use an 1176, you know, it's really good for singers, people who have longer sustain. I can't believe it. You feel me? Like it's kind of better for people who are singing because they have longer notes, longer sustain. And, you know, usually you would use the slowest attack. So this right here on this side, this would be the slowest attack. This would be, you know, the fastest attack. And when you hear when you use a faster attack, you really start to take the punch out, and, you know, the compressor really starts to become very aggressive and very isolated. And, you know, that's why sometimes I don't like to use something like an 1176, because, you know, things can get out of hand really quickly, especially if you're recording somebody who don't know how to rap, who don't know how to work a microphone. And the last option that you guys kind of have when it comes to using compressor, you can also use some type of board compressor, you know, SSL. You can also use something like the Avalon, the API, whatever. But I kind of like using something like the board compressors, just specifically the Neve 88RS, because it's kind of like all in one. You know, you just put it on its first unison slot. So even if you have it on a monitor or record, you know, whatever is in this first unison slot is always going to be committed. That's pretty convenient if you have Sphere. Maybe you just want to throw it in monitor for the Sphere a microphone, but then you want to just do the actual compression right here regardless of anything. But the main thing too about that is that, I don't know, the compression here usually sounds a little bit more cohesive because they're all within inside the same channel strip circuitry, like the SSL or the 88RS or the API. But the main thing here about it too is that you get to adjust the preamp. And usually when the people are rapping, I like to ride the gain a little bit too, just in case if you know some people sing louder than others, and that can make the compressor work a little bit too hard. But this Neve 88RS 88RS is pretty good because it's just a very simplified, you know, you have everything here, ratio, you have your release, you even have an auto release as well, you know, so that's kind of really good. You know, the SSL itself has an automatic makeup gain, but with something like the Neve 88RS, you know, it's just very musical. It has a very warming type of characteristic. So you always got to think about a couple things. The flow of you know, are you a fast rapper? Are you a slow rapper? What type of vibe you're going for? You know, are you going for a modern vibe or a throwback vibe? And then lastly, you always want to think about like kind of like the tonality of the compression. Do you want it to sound very aggressive? You know, your vocals on the way and you would pick something like an API, more energy, more mid forward, or do you want it to be creamy and kind of rich, but still sounding modern and transparent? That's where you would go with a Neve 88RS. So I hope I was able to give you guys some knowledge today, you know, and help you guys out. You know, me talking about compression. Just want to say thanks a lot for being a great part of my YouTube family. If you guys have any more questions or comments, go ahead and drop it down below. I hope I was able to help you actually think about what compressor is best for you, because everybody's voice is different, you know what I mean? So I just want to say thanks a lot for being a great part of my YouTube family. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Peace.